Well, Mike, I have made a couple New Year's resolutions. One is to eat as much chocolate as I can find. And the other is to limit my ice cream to a half gallon a day. I figure those are ones I can actually keep. So yeah. I really don't eat a half a gallon a day, but I'd like to. Well, I'm glad you're here this morning. We have been talking about the coming Christ and about awaiting his return. And I'm going to go a little ways away from that today, back a few hundred years, to tell you a story that you have heard many times. If you were brought up in church, you probably heard it before you left the nursery. But I'd like for you to listen to this story with new ears. It is a story that has every element of a good story. There is a bad guy. There is a hero. And there's victory. It's always good when the story ends with victory. But you know, the best thing about this story is that it is true. And we can find it in 1 Samuel chapter 17. Now that's a long chapter. It's a long story. And I'm not going to read all of it, but I am going to be referring back to the text. I decided not to read it for a couple of reasons. First, if I tried, because it is so long, Ron would be up here singing, letting me know that it was time to go home before I finished. And second, and maybe more importantly, is I can't pronounce half of the names in the passage, so I decided not to embarrass myself by trying. But I do want to set the stage. There were two armies, the Israelites and the Philistines. And they were facing each other over this imaginary line running down the valley between two hills. Kind of like drawing the line in the sand. And each morning, they would rise from their cots or pallets and line up and yell at each other across the valley. And the Philistines had this dude named Goliath who came out every morning, stepped out of the line all by himself, and dared someone to come and take him down. Let's read a little bit about that in verse 4. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. And for those of us who don't know what a cubit is, that means he was about 9 foot, 9 inches. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs, he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went ahead of him. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all of the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. Now, before we judge Saul and his army too harshly, remember that Goliath was a big dude. And when I say big, I mean huge. As I said, he was about 9 feet 9 inches tall and probably had the weight to match it. I don't see him as being tall and gangly. His armor alone weighed 176 pounds. So you can imagine how much he would have had to weigh in order to carry that much armor around. He wouldn't have had to be good in a fight. He would have just needed to get close enough to knock over and sit on his opponent in order to win. But there was more to Goliath than his weight. Verse 16 tells us that he was persistent. He came out every day, 2 times a day, to taunt the Israelites. He was basically going, na 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 boo boo. Come on over if you think you can. For 40 days without fail, he would taunt and tease the armies of Saul. Now, I'm sure that because Goliath was a man, that there were other insults hurled as well. Mothers insulted, looks made fun of, their manhood was questioned. However, he really didn't need any of those taunts. He just had to look at them and do this, and it would have scared them. It had Saul's army shaking in their boots. But besides his height, his weight, and his persistence, Goliath believed that he was enough. In verse 44, he basically says, come on over and I'll show you what I'm going to do to you. You think you're man enough to face me? Come on over. I'm going to not only kill you, but I'm going to feed your body to the wild animals. But Goliath kind of covered his bets because he said, if I can't do it, the gods that I serve will. So he had faith. Goliath had one huge thing against him, though, from the very beginning. He didn't know his enemy. We all face Goliath. Your giant may be mouthy, pushy, a bully. Your giant may cause you to question your faith, giving you grief about your choices, taunting you with, yeah, right. If there really is a God, why don't you ask him to do this? Your Goliath may be something that seems so big that it will be impossible to move. It might be an addiction, a habit, an illness, financial worries, a past that is so horrific you want to forget and too damaging to admit. We believe that our giants have some magical power behind them and cannot be beaten. We believe, like Goliath did, that these giants that we face have some magical God or power behind them that will destroy us. Often our giants will try to make us believe that if anyone knew that they were in our lives, that we would be shamed, judged, and defeated. And unfortunately, there are some people claiming the name of Christ that when they find your giants, they will use those to judge and shame. I wonder how many of us look back on our lives and remember that one lie that we told, one commandment that we have broken, or one person that we have hurt that turned into a giant. Maybe a sin that we have asked forgiveness for, yet comes out each day to throw taunts at us. Maybe it was a big thing, a person we betrayed, a series of hurts or actions or words that time after time damage someone's reputation. Maybe put a marriage at risk, or threw a punch that caused lasting damage. We've asked for God to forgive, but we still allow the giant not only to survive, but to thrive. Or maybe we have hidden an action so deep we don't even remember the details, but it's there. On the next hilltop, taunting, reminding, making you doubt your sanity, causing you to doubt your salvation. You see, Goliath wasn't worried about the Israelite army because he knew they were too afraid to come. And sometimes the Goliaths in our lives seem really small in the back of our head, just kind of tapping. Remember? Remember? How could God forgive that? Remember? Remember when you did that? You thought no one was looking? But someone knows. Our Goliaths may not look 9 feet tall, but they sure sound it. They sure have the power. David's Goliath and our Goliath have these things in common. They seem to have power. They look like they have power. They believe they have power. And they have the ability to make us believe that they are in control. The other thing that they have in common is the one thing that shows their vulnerability. They don't know what they're up against. These giants look at us and see scrawny little people with no weapons, no resources, and no power. But they forget that the God of Israel is the God of the universe, and He is on our side, and He can fight the giant. I don't gotta. Goliath didn't know it, but the minute David said, "I will go," the giant's days were over. It didn't matter how big he was, how much weapons he carried, how many weapons he carried. Whether it be a spear or a gun or a stone or a bomb, the giant didn't stand a chance. Because, see, here enters David, the other character in this story. Let's read verses 17 through 25. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are and bring back some assurance from them. They are with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines." Now, a little background on David here. David was the youngest of Jesse's sons. He would not have been old enough to go fight. And his job was that of the shepherd boy. Early in the morning, David left the flock in care of a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. He reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions, shouting their war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things with the keeper of supplies and ran to the battle lines and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine, champion from Gath, stepped out from his line and shouted his usual defiance. And David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Now, David, in a society where age and standing were important, David was the youngest and had the least important job. Verses 14 and 15 tells us that even though he had shown that he was good at this job, it was a job that nobody else wanted. Spending time with the stinky, not so smart, troublesome sheep each day and protecting them. But that's all that they felt, the people that were around him, that he was qualified to do. Now, I haven't felt young for several years, but I have felt lowly and unusable. I have wondered if I were enough. There are so many gifted speakers. Why did he ask me to bring a message? There are those who know more, have experienced more, and are in a better position. Why not use them? I'm just a lowly, chubby suburban mom. But you know, David knew who he was. But more importantly, he knew whose he was. And he didn't seem to question, am I enough? When his dad called and said, go, he went. He didn't say, I don't know, Dad, that's a long way. And you know, it's kind of snowing outside. I really don't want to go. He didn't give excuses like, oh, you know, the sheep would be lost without me. I really need to stay here. Or, Dad, isn't it Johnny's turn? Or maybe, isn't it time for a young person to stand up and do that job? Now, David wasn't perfect. As we see later in life, he was far from it. And even in this instance, there was a little bit maybe of self-evident in his words and actions. When he heard Goliath come out and make this demand, the first thing he said was, what's the prize? And then it was like, well, if that's the prize, why don't one of you guys go do it? Because the king had promised anybody that would go out and defeat Goliath would get riches and fame and get to marry the princess. And David just didn't understand. You're God's army. There's a great prize waiting for you. Why aren't you doing it? Sounds like a sarcastic little brother, doesn't it? But David didn't seem to question that it could be done. He didn't say, oh, I know it's going to be hard. Oh, I know it's a little scary. He just said, why aren't you going out and defeating this guy? Why aren't you doing it? His older brother gets mad and sends him away. But David, in verse 30, shows us that he was persistent. He just went to someone else and said, hey, guys, the prize is great. Why don't you go out and defeat this guy? It's just one. Well, somebody heard what David was saying and told Saul, and Saul called for David. I don't know what Saul's reasoning was for calling for David. I don't know if he thought David had some great wisdom or he just wanted to get him out of the way and quit making them look bad. But Saul said, David, come and talk to me. You know, sometimes when our giant is ruthless, we get tired of trying. We give up. We quit trying to make a dent in the debt that we have. We quit asking for help. We stop trying to manage the habits, the addictions, the depression, the anxiety. And sometimes the circumstances are overwhelming and they cause us to do what the Israelite army did and stand immobilized, terrified, too afraid to try because of what might happen if we fail. And then our failures will make it worse. You know it will. Because we've already been told by the giant that he's too big and that he's going to kill us. Now, David didn't want to die when he said these things. He did not want his brothers and the other soldiers to die. That wasn't what he was saying when he said, why don't you go do it? David wasn't interested in marrying the king's daughter. Not at that time. He was a kid. He just didn't question. Never crossed his mind that victory was theirs. Yeah, he was brave. When big, brawny, well-trained soldiers were terrified, David said, I'll go. He had faced lions and tigers and bears, oh my, and he had won. And he wasn't afraid of a 9-foot giant. Maybe he was able to believe because he was young and full of the arrogance of youth. Maybe some of us would describe him as stupid for believing that the giant could be slain. But I don't think so. I think David was brave because he knew that he had accomplished nothing on his own. He knew that the bear and the wolf and the lion that he had conquered, that he had protected the sheep from, he knew that those battles weren't his. He knew that he hadn't done it by himself. Sometimes maybe it takes a child for us to wake up and see our Goliath through their father's eyes. Yesterday, Allie sent me a picture of Booker playing in the snow. The look on his face was wondrous. We see the snow. We also see the ice, the cold, and the difficulty in getting around. But Booker saw the wonder. He experienced the joy of a new friend that he had just made and loaned his hat to. David was young enough to believe the truths he had been taught without the bias of knowing too many giants. Just as Booker was able to enjoy the snow without worrying about the icy roads. I believe that we must face our giants with the bravery of the young, with the total wonderment of God's power. David didn't look across the valley and see a giant. He looked across the valley and saw victory. He saw a victory that was waiting to be claimed. How many times have we missed the victory because we saw only the problem? How many times did we walk away from the prize because the pain of the journey was too much for us to take? What have we not accomplished because it cost too much to try? When we see the giant through our eyes, we are afraid. We look for answers and we try to defeat him, and we fail. We may try again and fail again. We may keep on trying, or we may give up and trembling run away. We may hide under a blanket of denial until finally we land on our knees and we look up at the 9-foot giant and see a God who is bigger, better, much more powerful. And we know, as David knew, to whom we belong. And we can see those giants that seem totally impossible to defeat through the eyes of the Father. And that's when the victories come. Not when we keep on trying by ourselves. Not when we get up each day and line up on the battlefield and face the giant with yells and taunts. But when we pick up the stones and walk with confidence toward the giant with faith and the victory. David didn't know what would happen when he faced Goliath, but he believed. He had heard the promise of victory his whole life. He had heard the stories, the parting of the sea, the water from the stone, the delivery from Egypt. He believed in the God that conquered those giants. This past season, we have celebrated the gift of the Son. We have more proof than David did that God will be victorious, because we know that the Son was born, that he lived a perfect life, that he died on the cross, and that he came back to life, defeating death and sin and all of our Goliaths. So what will you do when Goliath stands before you and says, you can't win, you can't stop, you can't forget, no one will forgive you, no one loves you, you're unlovable, you're unwanted? Will you, like David, pick up the stones, the things that God has provided for us to fight our giants, the doctors, the counselors, the pastors, our friends, our family, the Bible, prayer? Will you pick those things up and face Goliath with the faith and confidence? Or will you stay behind the battle line, trembling in fear and accepting defeat? It's really easy to look at someone else's life and see someone else's Goliath and say, I know the answer to that. I hear stories every day about people's lives that have been disrupted. Stories of survival that go beyond anything I can even imagine. My daughter asked me the other day, do you ever cry in session? Because that'd be really unprofessional. And I told her, I said, you know what, I haven't yet. But I've shed quite a few tears on the way back the hall. And when I closed that door to my office, there are some times when sobs rack my body as I think of the pain that God's children have endured. But then I remember that the Goliath that they face may be different than the one that I face, but the victory has already been won. The victory for them, the victory for me, the victory for you. All I have to do is pick up the stones and say, I'll go. The minute you say, I'll go, the minute you say, I believe, the victory's won. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to happen like this. It doesn't mean all desires are going to go away. It doesn't mean that debt's going to suddenly be paid. It just means that in the end, the victory is won. On this day, this first Sunday of the year, we have set aside a time to take part of the holy sacrament of communion. And I want you today, as you prepare to come to the table, to realize that this is just an outward sign that you're picking up the stones, that you accept the gift of adoption into the family of God. This ceremony that we do, it's just that, a ceremony. It's a gift that helps us to strengthen our faith. It is not a ritual to be taken lightly, but a sign that we accept renewal in Him. And I suggest to you, as the band comes up, Pastor Greg joins me at the podium. I suggest that as you dip your bread, the body of Christ, into the juice, the blood of His redemption, that instead of just walking back to your seat as usual with a smile and a nod at your fellow worshipers, but that you walk back with a prayer. God, help me face my giants. Help me see them for what they are. They may look big, but you are bigger. Give me the faith to believe that the battle is already won. Jesus knew that his disciples were going to need a reminder of his sacrifice. And so he set in motion the last dinner before his death. He took the loaf and he broke it. And he said, whatever or whenever you do this remembering what I have done. And he took the cup and he blessed it. And he said, when you take a drink of this, when you do this, remember what I have done. I have already slain your giants. Father, we come to you today, humbled, and we ask, Father, that you will bless this bread, that you will help us to remember that it's a sign, a remembrance of your gift, and that you will help us to remember that as we take a piece of this, that we are saying, we're yours. Father, we pray that you will bless this juice, that it will become for us the reminder of the blood that was shed, a reminder of the promise given. And Father, this week and on and beyond, as we face our giants, give us the strength. Give us the courage to do as David did, to do as Christ did, and say, yes, Father, I will go. Yes, Father, I will face them.